And welcome back to Philosophy Roulette, number 50. This is, how exciting, 50. Where we get some random philosophy paper and I give you my real-time reaction. Cool. So let's just see if there's anything like super new on the Phil papers. Let's see. Bioethics of neuroscience. Oh my god, let's see if that's like so crazy or not. Let's see. Keep doing that. I don't believe that this is only 2 pages. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Everything is like 2 pages? Like, how could that be 2 pages? Let's take a look. Well, if it's not there. Oh, interview. Alright. Well, maybe these are some interviews. Alright. No. Asian philosophy. Huh. I don't want 2019. I want the new stuff. Okay, nope. Maybe this is just like the end of last year's. Okay, so let's see. So this is 11 pages, maybe. Let's just go see what else we have. Moral plurality, moral relevant, and accommodation. That is, 15. I'm not doing that. This is 10. Death in the philosophy of Mahdi, Sadra, and Schopenhauer. Okay. This will be a bunch of stuff I cannot pronounce well. But that never stopped me before. So, this one was at the top of the list. Let's see if it's around. Japanese liberalism. How long is this? 11 pages. No, I'm not doing the 15-page one. 10 pages. Let's see. Nope. Come on, Roulette. Ooh, let's see. This one has 29 downloads, so maybe it will be here. Aha. Okay. Okay. We got 9 pages, and we're doing it. By Mahdi Homazadeh. Okay, Mahdi. So, if you're in chat with me live anytime, you can just go into the chat room and type exclamation point paper, and the link will pop up. So, one of 22. Okay, but they're double spaced. I have to read quick. Okay, no abstract. I have to cut down on the pages here. Okay, so Emergentism and Sadra psychology. According to Emergentism, emergent entities, both substance and properties, emerge from more basic fundamental entities, to which they are indeed irreducible, although the emergent entities only exist as long as the relevant basic entities exist. The former are nevertheless distinct and different from the latter. Tim Crane defines 2 components essential to the emergentist position: dependence and distinction. That is, mental properties are properties belong to physical objects, and dependent on them, but different from physical properties. According to emergentism, there is a hierarchy of complexity in material levels, including physical, chemical, biological, and psychological levels, in an upward order. Material kinds at each level are fully compounded from a variety of lower level kinds, ultimately ending in particles of the fundamental level. Thus, physics is the basic level of the hierarchy of science. Material substances at each level have certain relations specific to their own level, and any science is partly concerned with the study of the specific organizational relationships at a given level to formulate the rules governing them. Emergent laws that emerge from the rules governing the lower levels are by no means derived from them or reducible to them. Non-reducive emergentism versus materialistic emergentism. Emergentists are often counted as physicalists in the sense that they just believe in physical substance and reject such a thing as a metaphysical substance like Cartesian souls. Thus, from an emergentist point of view, the realm of the actual world, or at least the human beings, remains within and does not go beyond the limits of physical substances. But there is no consensus among them on whether mental properties and not mental substances are physical or non-physical. A group of emergentists consider emergent mental properties as non-physical and irreducible to the level of physics, while the other group still insist on the physicality of these properties. How then can an emergent property be independent of and irreducible to the base and origin of its emergence? The fact is that for non-reductive emergentists, an emergent phenomenon is a coin with two sides. On one side, it is dependent on its physical basis, and on the other side, it is independent of it. In the literature, independency of an emergent entity has been articulated in different ways, including the idea that the emergent phenomenon is irreducible to, inexplicable and unpredictable from, or multiply realizable at the base level. Such properties are applied to the whole system, but are not applicable to its single components. For example, the word liquid cannot be applied to a water molecule. Likewise, a single monomer does not possess the property of elasticity, but when a number of monomers connect in a chain, the resulted polymer has the elastic property. This sense of holism is often considered as a component of emergentism. Okay. I wouldn't mind, I'm not sure I got a whole, holism is, there's some sense of holism here. I have to think about exactly what this is. The holism, is it a component of emergentism, or is it basically something essential to emergentism? I don't know. Strong and weak emergentism. Pointing to the confusion resulted from the use of the term emergentism in science and philosophy, David Chalmers distinguishes between at least two different notions thereof: weak emergentism and strong emergentism. On his view, it can be said at a high-level phenomenon strongly emerges from a low-level domain if the truths concerning the high-level emergent phenomena are not even deducible in principle from truths in the low-level domain. We can say that a high-level phenomena emerges weakly from a low-level domain. However, if truths concerning that emergent phenomenon derive from the principles and rules governing the low-level domain in some way. Clearly, there is actually a strong emergent phenomenon, and if there actually is a strongly emergent phenomenon, it affects our ontology. However, the existence of a phenomenon that emerges weakly from the domain of physics and is in principle deducible from the features of the physical world does not threaten the completeness of physical laws. A clear case of strongly emergent phenomenon, in the view of some philosophers, such as Chalmers himself, is the phenomenal consciousness, according to Thomas Nagel, what it's like to be a creature, or a bat. Did he ever actually quote this to say creature, or... Yeah, I mean, it's fair enough to put the quotes on that, but I don't know if that's actually a quote from Nagel. In fact, if consciousness is a strongly emergent entity, the laws of the level of consciousness will not be derived from physical laws. In other words, a possible world can be imagined where the laws of physics are applicable, but there are no laws of the level of consciousness. Such a world can be called a zombie world. And those are scare quotes on that one. Not scare quotes, but whatever. John Searle, having explained two types of emergentism similar to weak and strong versions of Chalmers' view, rejects the possibility of taking consciousness as a strongly emergent entity. However, Searle takes an example of a system S made up of elements A, B, C, so on. There are properties of S that are not necessarily properties of A, B, C, so on. For example, S might weigh 10 pounds, but none of its molecules weighs 10 pounds. Searle calls such properties system properties. So we got a holism is back. The shape and weight of the stone belong to this category of properties. But certain other system properties cannot be made up of merely the composition or the arrangement of the elements. Such properties have to be explained in terms of the causal interactions among the elements. Searle calls this second category causally emergent system properties. Solidity, liquidity, and transparency are examples of such properties. Thus, consciousness is, in Searle's view, a causally emergent property. Consciousness is an emergent character of central neuronal systems in the same way that solidity and liquidity are emergent characters of molecular systems. This is to say that, in Searle's view, the existence of consciousness can be explained in terms of causal interactions between elements of the brain at the micro level, but consciousness cannot be deduced from the sheer physical structure of the neurons without some additional account of causal relations between elements of the brain. Okay. Searle suggests that the concept of causal emergence, which he calls emergent 1, has to be distinguished from a stronger conception of emergence, which he calls emergent 2. In his view, a property is emergent 2 if and only if that feature is emergent 1 and has causal power that cannot be explained by the causal interactions between the elements of the system. If consciousness was emergent 2, then it could cause things that could not be explained by the causal relations between neurons. The raw idea behind such a view is that consciousness springs out due to the behavior of the neurons in the brain, but once it has sprung out, it will have a life of its own. In Searle's view, conscious is an emergent 1, but not emergent 2. Okay. Emergentism and mind-body supervenience. The main idea of the mind-body supervenience is that objects are indiscernible in their physical properties, will also be indiscernible in their mental properties. Supervenience is a relation where some properties supervene on another property, such that changes in the base properties cause changes in the supervenient properties, and of course the supervenient properties might, unlike the base properties, be non-physical. Jae-Gwon Kim argues that every emergentist has to accept the mind-body supervenience. Consider a situation where a mental state, such as pain, emerges from a specific combination of neural states. It is unlikely for any prominent emergentist to deny that if a completely identical physiological state reoccurs, a completely identical mental state will emerge too. We must consider supervenience as an essential component of emergentism. But the main question is whether supervenience laws are fundamental and irreducible laws, or are laws derived from the level of physics. If some of the principles of supervenience are among fundamental laws, then features of consciousness will be emergent features, but if supervenience laws are derived, non-fundamental, then the character of consciousness is considered as resultant rather than emergent. Okay, so if you start putting the laws of supervenience, if you count them as physical, or you count them as like natural, that's an interesting way to go. So this main question here. So, I mean, where does supervenience itself reside? Is it a metaphysical thesis, or is it a naturalistic thesis? Is what's being asked here. That's an interesting question. Let's go down to the problems of emergentism. While emergentism attempts to preserve its commitment to the general physicalist framework and avoid introducing a domain of non-physical entities, such as the Cartesian soul, in philosophical ontology there are nevertheless different respects in which it still faces serious problems posed by physicalists. Here we mention two important problems in this regard. Number 1. Ambiguity in the mechanism of supervenience. Physicalists note that supervenience merely makes the claim about determination or necessitation of a property B by a set of other properties A, without saying how B is derived or result from A, or how the fact that an object B can be explained in terms of the fact that it has A. Opponents of emergentism believe that supervenience, while necessary for emergentists, is not sufficient. In Kim's view, supervenience simply expresses an interesting pattern of covariation between two sets of mental and physical bodily properties. Irreducibility of emergent properties to their base properties just gives us a negative account. It means that it tells us about what is not an emergent entity, while remaining silent about what it is. Kim believes that emergentists must seek to provide positive description of emergence that goes beyond supervenience and irreducibility. Unless this is done, the thesis that mind emerges from the body remains uninteresting and without much content. Okay. Mental causation, 2. We all believe that the mind has the ability to make causal effects in the physical world, be it a mental causation. For example, believing that ice cream is delicious causes a desire to eat it. Is that really what a belief is? Okay. Or mental physical causation. The desire to read a book causes the act of reading. But how can this be philosophically explained? Mental causation is considered an issue that every thesis about mind-body relationship must have an idea to explain. In his formulation of the problem of mental causation for emergentists, Kim maintains that everyone who wants to talk about the causal effects of emergent properties will be faced with the following pattern. When a mental property M emerges, it supervenes on certain specific physical properties, and the physical property P can causally affect the production of various behaviors without any problem. Now, what causal efficacy remains for M? It may seem that M is excluded from having causal efficacy by P. So mental M emerges, it's on the physical, so what is the M really doing? Okay. The problem of causal exclusion gives us the impression that mental properties are in causal competition with their basic physical properties, a competition which physical properties are connected to physical effects, behaviors, without any problems, and consequently mental properties must either find a way to do the same action already done by their basic physical properties or face a causal exclusion. So what is the mental actually doing if it's just the physical that has all the causal power? In fact, the affirmation of the causality of M at time t and the denial of causality of P at t is a clear violation of the principle of physical closure. I mean, this is saying that there'd have to, it's a non-natural. We actually discussed this kind of recently, that this would have to be a non-natural thing, because if the underlying stuff wasn't active, the physical, the P, then there'd be something non-physical, that'd be M, and so physics would not be closed. It'd be subject to sort of miraculous causation. But to affirm that P has a physical cause as well will lead to the following question. What causal operation remains for M to contribute? Thus, the mental causation will be subject to causal exclusion, and the physical causation will have a priority. Besides, the idea of there being causal relationship between P and M is not satisfactory, since it faces the problem of mental physical causation and leads to the violation of the principle of physical closure. Overdetermination is a condition in which there are two distinct and sufficient causes for one effect. This means that even if one of the two causes, e.g. the mental cause, did not exist, the effect would still happen thanks to the other, for example, the physical cause. However, this is in serious contradiction with the general intuition about the causation of mental states for physical states. This argument will either lead to reductivism, the reduction of the mental properties or states to a purely physical level, or eliminativism, which just believes in mental concepts but not mental entities in the world. According to Connor and Churchill, one reply to such a conclusion from the causal exclusion argument is to consider a third option: no reductionism and no eliminationism, but emergentism. In their view, the rejection of the principle of physical causal closure is enough to block the eliminative or reductive conclusions. It is clear, however, that critics of emergentism regard the rejection of physical closure as a departure from completeness and predictability of physics in relation to physical events, and thus they will not allow it. I actually reject physical causal closure on the grounds that I think it's dogmatic. So you can have it, but you're just being dogmatic. So I don't reject it in terms of doing the physics. I think it has it has some dogmatic assumptions in it, and you have to just bite the bullet on those if you want the physical causal closure. Anyway, of course, it must be noted here that the pattern of the causal efficacy of non-physical properties should be compared with the schema of causal powers at the level of physical properties. Naturally, if in accordance with strong emergentism we believe in a level beyond physics, which is specific to mental properties, then it is quite possible to shape our idea of the manner of interactions between this layer and underlying layers differently from physical efficacies and common formulas about physical causal powers. One level of non-physical reality might exert its causal interventions through patterns similar to physical formulas. Patterns of causal efficacy. So now we've gotten some sort of pattern, some sort of mathematical structure or some other structure. Not quite sure what that is yet. However, the above account does not give us a positive idea of what these patterns are. Yes, getting ahead of myself here. Moreover, the critics of emergentism could still object that the intervention of the level of non-physics in the level of physics, even through patterns dissimilar to the formula of the physical causation, still involves the intervention of non-physical realm into the realm of physics. It is unclear how defenders of the idea insist on saying that they have not violated the principle of physical closure. Advocates of emergentism have, moreover, tried to argue that causation of mental properties for neurochemical and physical properties is not a case of downward causation. They explain that the causation of the mind for the body is what should be called systematic causation. Of course, this version of emergentism also rejects the layered model of ontology on which the being is divided into a hierarchy of discrete levels. On this view, the universe is not a hierarchy of autonomous levels, including atoms, molecules, cells, and the like, but a network of mutually embedded and inextricably interconnected realities. That is, mental properties are not a higher level than biological, neurochemical properties. Therefore, one had better divide the world into systems and subsystems rather than levels and sublevels. In this approach, the violation of the principle of physical causal closure will no more be a cause of concern. But it seems that we are still far from the explanation of causal relations between mental properties and physical properties. In any case, we have both physical and non-physical subsystems in a system. How do these two parts of a system causally interact with each other? We are still speaking of a non-physical mental properties, and that their non-spatiality persists even when they are placed in a system. Now, how can non-spatial properties, even when placed in a system, causally affect the spatial and directed physical properties within the same system? Replacing layers by systems does not seem to solve this explanatory gap. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Mullah Sadra's plan, the twofold monism with a corporeal incipience. I do not know what these words mean. Sadra al-Muta al-Hin, however, I'm just gonna, no chance of being able to say that fast. However, considers the mind as a signal substance with two aspects, material body and immaterial. That is, in his view, the body is also a degree or an aspect of the mind itself. Okay. He distinguishes three kinds of substance existence: pure material existence, pure immaterial existence, and the existence of the soul. In this classification, Sadra first divides forms into material and immaterial, and then he introduces two types of material forms: the forms submerged in the matter and the forms transcending the matter. The realms of existence are three: the realm of the intellect, the realm of the soul, and the realm of nature. The first is entirely immune to multiplicity, the second is immune to spatial plurality and material division, and the third is subject to a range of pluralities, contradictions, and divisions. Okay. According to the existence of the soul is neither purely material nor purely immaterial. The main point in Mullah Sadra's view, which is largely consistent with the strong emergentist theory of philosophers from the 20th century on, is a corporeal incipience of the soul. In Sadr al-Muta al-Halin's view, the soul has stages and degrees, and it starts out with the lowest and most basic level of matter, from which it comes into being. In other words, the soul starts out as purely material and corporeal, but gradually over time and throughout its substantial motion, it becomes more intensified in its existence, existentially expanded and qualified to possess an immaterial dimension and its graded perfections. He analogizes the corporeal incipience and the initial need of the soul for the body and its later independence from the body and its spiritual survival to a fetus that first needs the womb and its mother, but later gains independence from both. Therefore, in Sadra's view, human souls are material forms whose incipience is also material. Of course, gradually and after obtaining a certain capacity in matter, they transcend from it to an immaterial state, whilst the very state of immateriality is in turn a gradable state that has levels and can be intensified or declined in its existence through a substantial motion. Moreover, it should be noted that immaterial soul and material body must be considered as two aspects of a single substance, which is the human mind. So we've got a emergentist mind here as part of it. So the emergence is generated here. We've got a generating emergence as opposed to just a some sort of emergence that just comes with the system. This is a generative theory, which is interesting. So let's find out what happens next. Exciting. The examination of the idea of the corporeal incipience of the soul reveals that it seems close and similar to emergentist theories, that is to the strong emergentist theories that consider the mind to go beyond the level of physics and yet be the result of a certain degree of complexity in physics from which it emerges. In this respect, Sadra's theory is very similar to emergentism, while it was presented about 4 centuries prior to the introduction of emergentism. However, the main difference between the views of emergentists and Sadr al-Muta al-Hin is that they believe in the supervenience of metaphysical properties on and the emergence from purely physical substances, while Sadr does not consider the mental level as properties of the body. In his view, the soul is the form and the first perfection of the natural body that forms a new natural species through its inherence in the body. This form and its first perfection determine the species, and its attachment to the body is essential rather than accidental. The soulhood of the soul, namely its attachment to and control and manipulation of the body, is part of its essence. On this view, the body is not even a matter for the form of the soul. Instead, the combination of body and soul is a new single substance whose matter is the preceding form. That is, the form it possesses before it became a human being. Okay. The common challenge for Sadrism and Emergentism. Despite its significant differences with Emergentism, Sadr al-Muti al-Hind's theory faces both aforementioned challenges, ambiguity in the manner of connection, and mental causation that were raised against strong Emergentism. Confronted with contemporary physicalists, Sadr's twofold monism faces the question of how it explains the connection between the immaterial aspect of the mind with the immaterial with the material aspect. Also, which positive models does it deploy to solve the problem of mental causation? Of course, physicalists have not explicitly posed these problems against Sadr's theory, or for that matter, they have not even referred to or perhaps studied the theory of this Muslim philosopher. But because of the sameness of the ground of the problem and the commonality of Sadr's theory with dualism and strong emergentism in this respect, the aforementioned problems can be reconstructed against the theory of Sadr's philosophy. As to the first problem, the ambiguity of manner and the connection between the immaterial and the material, to insist that Sadr al-Muti al-Lahin has argued against Ibn Sina's dualism by reducing two substance dualism to one cannot be the solution, for non-physical and physical aspects of Sadr's single substance are in a causal interaction with each other, and confronted with physicalists, he inevitably has to explain this interaction to solve the problem. Dualists were faced with this question in explaining the connection between two physical and non-physical substances, and Sadrian philosophers are also faced with this challenge in explaining the non-physical and physical levels of the mind. By studying the work of Sadr and other Muslim philosophers, it appears that issues pertaining to immateriality of the soul, they usually have sought to prove why the soul is non-physical. In parts of their work concerning the faculties of the soul, the main purpose has been to explain the multiplicity of faculties and the unity of the immaterial soul. Even in this part, we do not find any contents concerning how the connection between the soul's faculties and the body should be. Of course, what has always been important in Sadr's philosophy is to provide a rational analysis on the principle of existence, gradation in existence, and substantial motion. The connection of the soul with its multiple faculties, and thereby with the body parts, organs, is drawn in the framework of this rational analysis based on the principality of existence, and is not dependent on or in need of empirical explanation. However, Sadr himself has not neglected to provide an explanation based on old physics can be highlighted regarding the problem posed by physicalists. Sadr and the philosophers before him talked about the vaporous spirit or animal spirit, which according to them plays a mediating role between the material body and the immaterial soul in their causal relationship. Sadr al-Muta al-Hin considers the animal spirit to be in fact a type of subtle body, which is beyond this dense dark body, and its subtlety and mediation between the material and immaterial provide a means for the faculties of the soul which flow in the body parts. In fact, the faculties of the soul belong in the first place to the subtle vaporous body, and in the second place they flow in the body parts by means of vaporous soul. Elsewhere he grounds the recourse to this subtle substance in evidence by what physicians of the era called spirit. Of course, today with the progress of neuroscience, it has become clear that the idea of animal spirit is basically false, and what was called so and considered to have an intermediate nature between the material and immaterial can be equivalent to the electrical current generated in neurons to their ends in individual body parts. But can such a fact account for the relationship between immaterial and material, as in Ibn Sina, Sadr, and others tried to? Indeed, it seems that, regardless of the falsity of the doctrine of old physicians and philosophers about animal spirits, it cannot provide physicalists with a clear explanation of the causal relationship between the non-physical level and the physical level. The reference to a subtle mediatory body, which has some parts both material and immaterial features, does not answer the question about the rules of the effect on a non-spatio-temporal entity, the material soul, on a spatio-temporal entity, subtle body, rather adds to the ambiguity. Should we consider the space and spatiality as gradations and having varying degrees of existential intensity and weakness within all levels, from the material to the immaterial in some way, or should temporality and spatiality finally end at a point beyond which the entity reaches the end of immateriality? If the latter is the case, which seemingly appears in many statements by Sadra and other Muslim philosophers, the question about the rules and the way the causal connection between the two sides of this border will still exist. Even similar questions about the interaction between the subtle body, vaporous spirit, and the dense body, the material body, even similar questions appear about the interaction between the subtle body and the dense body. In other words, there is a further ambiguity involved in how causal force is transmitted from a subtle body without weight into a dense body. As to the second question about mental causation, the same challenge posed by physicalists against emergentism and dualism can be reconstructed against Sadra's theory. Of course, Muslim philosophers can point out it is indeed the case that the aforementioned questions under the title of mental causation, such as the violation of the principle of physical causal closure and overdetermination, are irrelevant to their ontology. As their ontology begins with the necessary existence in pure immaterial world and defines multiple worlds between the material world and higher level world of existence, it does not make sense to talk about the principle of closure of the causal chain of physical events. It is natural that, according to their view, many, if not all, the physical events in some way occur under the causal effect of non-physical realities, and ontological parsimony and the closure of an entirely physical chain of causes and events must be put aside. It is clear that the issue of overdetermination is also dimmed by believing in the correlation between physical cause and the non-physical cause, because on this view it is not possible for the physical cause to have efficacy without the operation of the non-physical cause, and consequently we will not have two independent causes that have an effect on a particular physical behavior. But these arguments are grounded in the intra-paradigmatic grounds of Sadra's philosophy and will be fruitless in a debate within the physicalist paradigm. To this end, it seems necessary for the advocates of Sadra's philosophy to more seriously consider empirical and physical explanations and seek to amplify and update the explanations offered by Ibn Sina and Mullah Sadra for causal mediation between the soul and the body based on new findings of natural science. Conclusion. By reviewing the strong emergentism and comparing it with Sadra's psychology, we can find fundamental similarities between these two, which are primarily related to emergence of a non-physical level from the physical level. However, there are significant differences between these two, since in particular emergentism speaks of the supervenience of non-physical properties predicated on the single physical substance body, while Sadra's theory believes in a unique substance that extends from the material degree to the immaterial degree and forms an entirely single substance. There are also common challenges before emergentist and Sadrian philosophers when faced with questions posed by physicalists. Most notably, the questions are concerned with the explanation of the causal relationship between the physical and the metaphysical levels, and it seems that Sadra's philosophy also requires some further elaboration and completion in order to have an effective contribution to this literature. Okay, cool. So that was sort of historical in nature. So a historical theory of emergence from Sadra. And it's interesting, it's like these problems, they have existed for a long time in all parts of the world, and people have different things to say. And they're interesting, and sometimes you get like some gems of wisdom from unexpected sources. So this looks like a nice thing to look at if you want to go and come at emergentism from a different perspective. I don't have a ton to say about because it looked like the author did a nice job rounding it out at the end, showing the laying out the difficulties for this approach. So this is a nice paper, and it does present a alternative perspective on what looks like a very contemporary problem. I mean, the whole first half of this paper was just outlining the contemporary view. I mean, the last few years, and then showing how the old Sadra hundreds of years ago was dealing with the same problems. So, okay, I hope you liked that. You can always send me a message and for what to review next. And have a good day. Stay safe, everybody.